parents and the dreams of children. And guess what? We're turning that spark into a show. Introducing Spark. Spouses, parents, and children. Only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. A program filled with real talk, life hacks, inspiring stories, and yes, even the fun and laughter that keep families strong. So tune in, light up your day, and let's celebrate what makes every family shine. Spark. Spouses, parents, and children. Only on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. Your campus, your community, your spark of inspiration.
Get your daily dose of inspiration through our music. Follow Just Call PH on Spotify and Just Call Music on YouTube.
Listen to songs and artists you didn't know you'd like. This is the Indie List on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
W Eagle kami, di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay Atenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan, Kawal ni Ignacio, sugod, todo sa kayod, punong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, galing-giting at gigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan,
Coming up next, Cura, conversations on care, health, and healing on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, Radyo, Katipunan. Sa Blue Eagle kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay Atenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero, sugod, todo sa kayod, tulong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, galing-giting nagigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan, Radyo, 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 Katipunan, Radyo, Katipunan.
Health isn't just about medicine,
It's about care
community, and conversation.
That's why Radyo Katipunan brings you Cura, your campus medical show.
From everyday wellness tips to expert advice on the health issues that matter most to you.
Cura is here to listen, guide, and care
The Ateneo way.
Join us as we talk about healing
Hope and health right here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Cura, your campus health companion
Where care meets conversation.
gabi po sa ating lahat. Sana po ay maganda ang ating gabi kahit umuulan at mahangin ngayon, no? So, welcome back to Cura, Conversations on Care, Health, and Healing. Tapos yung episode po natin ngayong gabi, tamang-tama dito sa bagyong ito, Understanding Difficult Behaviors and Tantrums in Young Children. So, I'm Dr. Tipi Sumpayco Tansangco, and with me,
And I'm Dr. Jello Apostol, isang maulan pero makakalikasang gabi, Dr. P, and sa ating mga listeners. And tama ka, Dr. P, today we're talking about something that hopefully many of our listeners who are also parents can relate to. How children grow and develop.
tama, Doc Jello, no? And I have to say, as parents ourselves, medyo adults na yung mga anak ko, pero nung mas bata-bata sila talaga, we know that moment when you're watching your child and thinking parang, tama ba to? Normal ba tong behavior na to? Kailangan ba akong kabahan? Or am I just being an anxious parent? Or alam ko marami tayong mga teachers na nanonood sa atin ngayon, parang, ano ba itong nakikita ko dito? So, yun yung mga dumadaan sa isip natin, di ba, Doc Jello?
Yes, now I'm also like you. I myself am a father to an 11-year-old, but I remember when Mateo, my son, was a baby. I remember those times that I'd wake up at like 2 a.m. or 3, and then I would Google, is it normal for a 3-year-old to do this? And then when you go to the internet, you just fall down the rabbit hole because you see a lot of conflicting information that hopefully we get to settle and clarify for our listeners today.
Tama, exactly, Doc Jello, no? So, today, we're bringing you expert guidance, practical answers, and hopefully some peace of mind after this episode. So, we're going to talk about typical development, when to be concerned, and mag-imbita tayo ng expert. Nag-imbita tayo talaga ng expert para real evidence-based information ang makukuha natin.
And I'm very excited, Dr. P, to listen to what our expert has to say and also to engage our expert in answering some of the questions and concerns that our parents and our listeners have sent to us before this show. And I'm sure we'll be getting a lot more questions as we go through today's episode. So we do encourage our listeners, please come in with your questions and we're more than happy to answer this.
Sige, Doc Jello, simulan na natin, no? So, tonight, kahit maulan, we're thrilled to have Dr. Angel Bell D. Dr. Angel is a leading clinician and researcher on early childhood behavior, parent-child interaction, and she supports families through everyday challenges. So, kasama rin natin siya sa ACRI, di ba, Doc Jello? And Dr. Angel is now taking her PhD. Ina-announce ko po at kiniklaim na namin for her. She's taking her PhD in infant and early childhood development sa Fielding University. So, good evening, Doc Angel.
Good evening po, Dr. P and Dr. Jello. Sabi naman, kinakabahan na tuloy ako. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me join you today.
So, Doc Angel, kwentuhan lang to, no? But thank you very much for joining us. Doc Angel, before we dive into today's discussion, and also para mas makilala ka ng ating mga tagapakinig, can you tell us what drew you to the field of early childhood development? What made you passionate about helping families understand and support their children through their, especially when their children are having big emotions and what others would say difficult behaviors? So what drew you to early childhood development?
Well, first off, I've always loved children. But I guess what I realized is with working with families, madalas madami sa kanila, they tend to blame themselves. They tend to worry about these difficult behaviors. I think tantrum being one of the most common, but certainly a lot of their concerns are behavior related and challenging behaviors related. So, minsan iniisip niya, tigas ng ulo ng anak ko, bakit parang nagkukulang ba ako sa pag-parent ko sa kanila. And so, I think having experience working with them in clinic, talking through the challenges that they have, and then helping them understand that some of these things are a part of the development of their kids. Kaya gumaganda tuloy yung relationship nila. So at the end of the day, it's the relationship of supporting the parents and children that has been the most rewarding for me. Kaya din, napasa ako sa this type of work and just helping with the connections of our family members.
So, ang galing. Actually, ang daming ang extra training ni Doc Angel sa field eh. 'Di ba? At saka, hindi, appreciate ko yung work mo na hindi lang yung bata, 'di ba? Talagang yung families, yung coaching na nangyayari. I think very important yun kasi hindi naman kaya ng isang tao lang yung management yung of child behavior tsaka yung development no ng children. Pero Doc Angel, siguro let's start with basics muna. So, halimbawa, sabi natin yan nasa title natin kasi 'di ba, yung mga difficult behavior. So, when we talk about tantrums and difficult behaviors, ano yung mga things na kailangan maintindihan ng mga magulang, ng mga teachers? Like, bakit ito nangyayari sa mga young children?
Well, I think it has to come into context. Ano kaya yung difficult behaviors that they're actually experiencing? We can take tantrums as the umbrella model that we kind of follow through, di ba? We have our terrible twos. Yung iba, sabihin natin, may terrible threes kasi hindi natigil sa terrible twos. And it's because children are, quote-unquote, misbehaving or not following as they're told or as they're expected. And so I think one of the things we need to remind ourselves is minsan some of these behaviors are actually part of their normal development. Not saying that we should just allow every difficult behavior to continue, pero I think very important na maalala natin is that it's part of brain development actually. So some of the ways they behave is because they lack self-control, they lack what we call emotion regulation. Dami nilang big feelings, yun yung binanggit ni Doc Jello kanina. This big feeling, they're not quite sure what to do with it. And it's because may areas po tayo sa brain that is not fully mature yet. And therefore, yun yung behaviors na napapansin natin. And then these things tend to be triggered by certain things. If you try to review yung triggers natin, they're hungry, they're tired, they could be frustrated. There are some children na overstimulated lang din sila. Masyadong madaming pinapagawa sa kanila, tapos napapagod din sila. So these are sometimes the reasons why we have these tantrums per se.
So, Doc Angel, no, ang ganda ng sinabi mo na we also have to understand that children are not really young adults, no, or small adults. Their brain is different. Their brain is still developing. So there really is a room for understanding and, most importantly, patience. Diba? So really meeting them where they are, trying to understand where they're coming from, and really listening to them. But Angel, while you were sharing, we actually got a question from our listeners. And I think this is something that a lot of parents, especially parents with what many people would say children with difficult behavior have encountered. So the question is, Doc Angel, my toddler throws tantrums almost every day. And what made it difficult for this parent is sometimes these tantrums are in public. So, Doc Angel, what can we say kaya, parang to this parent? Like, what advice can we give this parent, especially when their children would showcase these like difficult behaviors in public?
Yes.
Una,
maraming salamat.
Angel.
Yeah, go lang.
Meron tayong question din galing kay Ma'am Virgie. Mag-shoutout na tayo. Si Ma'am Virgie kasi works in Basic Ed sa Ateneo. So, hi Ma'am Virgie. May itatahi ko dun sa question ni Doc Jello yung tanong niya, di ba? So, ang sabi din ni Ma'am Virgie, kasi na-experience daw nila to sa real life in our campus, no? How will you differentiate na regular tantrum pa to or regular behavior pa tong nakikita nila versus hindi na pala siya within yung typical na development, no? So, bigyan mo siguro tayo din ng tips. And then tell us, paano nga kung in public nakikita? Siguro school kasi public na rin yun, di ba, Doc Inch? Hindi siya sa bahay eh.
Tama. And I think even harder kasi it's the teachers who are experiencing it, not necessarily the parents. So una-una, maraming salamat po sa parent and to Ma'am Virgie for the question. And of course, Doc Tippy, as a DevPeds, feel free to jump in at any given time. Siguro break it down natin kasi we're talking about our toddlers from our parents' question and our basic ed, which is slightly older children. When we think about our toddlers, so we're thinking 3 years below, maybe sometimes 4 years old. Technically, they don't toddle anymore. Therefore, they're not toddlers. Nalaki na sila. Yeah, but we have to think of, I always go back to thinking about it in terms of brain development. So ang brain development po kasi in terms of regulating emotions are just coming online in the first 4 years of life. So kung tatanungin po natin kung normal po ba na nagka-tantrum ang bata with 4 years below, the answer is yes. But we also need to look at other aspects, hindi lang yung behavior mismo, but where the behavior is coming from. So if let's say nagka-tantrum sila at that age and natutulungan naman natin silang kumalma. So we have babies who might cry. Kinakalma natin yan by carrying or soothing them. When they're toddlers, we might also either distract them because that's appropriate, or we might, use different ways of reasoning with them that's appropriate. If that works for them, if the tantrum doesn't extend beyond, let's say, over 20 minutes and it's not happening in the extreme way, then perhaps that is still within normal behavior. No, but if it goes into the extreme, it's unusually long, or if we're actually seeing developmental delays in partnership with the behaviors that we're seeing, then perhaps that's something we will want to look into. Otherwise, that's usually part of the normal phase of development. No? So I will probably then shift to our grade schoolers. Diba? So the reason why I explain all of these things first, because sometimes it's very helpful in the first 4 years na meron po tayong parent that or caregiver that is supporting their quote-unquote dysregulation. Pero hopefully, once we get into grade school ages, mas kaya sana nila the new situation, which might be causing some of the discomfort that leads to the challenging behaviors that they experience. But not saying our kids are perfect kasi yun nga, although brain development fastest in the first 4 years, itong regulation nila actually doesn't finish until they're 25. So therefore, nagiging challenge, I guess, for our teachers is how can we support regulation in class? Some practical things would be understanding where they come from. Ano yung nag-trigger ng sometimes some of our behaviors. Some practical things classroom-wise would be supporting transitions na hindi abrupt, changing from one activity to another, maybe transition times. And we actually have some studies that support having movement breaks in between school helps children regulate better. And sometimes the difficult behaviors lesson also.
Doc Angel, may iba-iba ba yung techniques? Kasi 'di ba, like sabi mo nga, wow, hanggang higher ed pala ang covered ng developing brain, no, kung 25. Pero like meron ba yung specific? Like kung halimbawa sobrang bata, wala pa sa school, kunyari daycare pa lang, or 'di ba, by the time they're kinder, meron na tayo ngayong kinder, 'di ba, na na pumapasok, pwede bang sa kinder meron ding mga nagtatantrums pa? Ngayon makikita natin, di ba, minsan grade school na or high school na, pati sa junior and senior high natin, minsan meron din tayong mga nakikitang behaviors doon. Like, kailangan bang ma-differentiate? Or meron bang yung tinatawag natin na age-appropriate na tantrums? Meron ba ganon? Age-appropriate na tantrums even at that age?
Maybe more of a general guideline versus age-related. Kasi mahihirapan tayo if we say age-related. Sabihin natin, pag 7-year-old, dapat 0 tantrum. But we all know, you and I as adults, pag gutom tayo, ininis tayo, sometimes we explode also.
Hungry tayo, hungry.
Hungry tayo, we get frustrated, magmumok-mok. Nangyayari din siya sa atin. So adults have tantrums. So what more are young children also? I think that's one thing to kind of remember and remind ourselves na if we can't be 100% perfect, what more are younger children? The second one I would think about is more than per age, I'm wondering if we can try to understand kung kaya na ba ng bata mag-regulate na mag-isa. So there's this model that we talk about when we work with children. Kasi sabi niya nga, dami kong training, di ba? We call it the 3 Rs. So we think about regulation, relation, and reasoning. So, is this child able to regulate themselves? Meaning, pag nainis na sila, kaya nila pakalmahin ng sarili. If unable, susuportahan mo sila sa regulation, helping calm down. If they can or once na-regulate mo na sila, that's when you enter as a relational person. I'm here, I'm supportive, I mean well for you, and that's when you can enter into what we think of as reasoning. Kasi nasa grade school na tayo. So then that's when we enter into explaining what the rules might be, what consequences might happen because something negative occurred. So that I try to think of it in that way in terms of skills ng child more than age of the child, if that makes sense.
Doc Angel, ang ganda no? Kasi one of the I think real world challenges encountered by our parents is like a lot of parents think there's one school of thought na iniisip nila kapag ang child nagtatantrum, hayaan mo lang hanggang sa mapagod. Di ba? May ganung school of thought. And then may isang school of thought naman, yung mga kind of parenting na kapag nagtatantrum yung bata, you negotiate. Either you offer a punishment, papaluin kita kapag hindi ka tumigil, or you offer a reward. Bibili na lang kita ng candy, huwag ka nang umiyak. So what you're saying here, Doc Angel, is it's not about ignoring them or it's not about negotiating or offering rewards or incentives, but also just first stepping back and understanding where's my child at, di ba? Or kaya na ba niya mag-self-regulate? And then, deciding your course of action based on that. Parang ganun ba? Tama ba yun, Doc Angel?
Yes, I think you put that in a much better understandable term. Kasi diba, yung explanation mo is, ignore na lang kita kasi maintindihan mo na lang na hindi mo dapat ginagawa yun. That's reasoning eh. Right? And if we follow the 3 Rs, and if let's say hindi nga nila kaya mag-regulate, pero nag-reason ka ng reason, wala tayong mapupuntahan. They might stop in the moment, pero that means next time, mauulit at mauulit din siya.
So sequence pala yun talaga, Doc Age, di ba? Siguro ulitin lang natin. So we start with regulation. At yun yung role natin din siguro, pati sa mga teachers natin, di ba? In the classroom, kasi kailangan natin mag-co-regulate with the younger child. Tapos pagkatapos ng regulation, ano yung susunod?
Relate. Relating with them.
So anong ibig sabihin naman ng relating with the child? Pag nahipansan na siya, hindi siya masyadong nagwawala, paano yung magpag-relate with the child?
What I realized through using it in terms of our Filipino families is we are always ready to relate naman. As Filipino culture, kasi we're a relational culture. So what tends to happen is yung pag-regulate natin is relational as well. And thank you for saying co-regulation. Minsan po kasi it's not a terminology na known to us. It's a very Western term. Pero ginagawa natin siya. You and I are co-regulating right now kasi kinakabahan nga ako, diba?
Parang kinakabahan. So nagko-co-regulate tayong tatlo. Right, Doc Jello?
So co-regulation is part of the relationship that we all have. Kasi nga sabi niya, magkaka-work tayo sa ACRI and all of these things. So building that relationship and regulation together is what we talk about when we say relate. So for example, the older children, let's say nagka-tantrum siya, can we help support them by identifying the emotion that they have? And we're doing that because I know you, I understand where you're coming from. Labelan natin yung emotion that you're seeing. And hopefully by labeling that emotion, we are co-regulating with you. We use that relationship. And pag mas kalmado na siya, that's when we bring in the reasoning and the talking.
Magandang tandaan yun, no? Hindi pwedeng baliktad. Hindi pwedeng unahin yung reasoning bago mag-regulate. Ganda nun, Doc Inch. Sige. Ito meron tayong, siguro tatanungin ko lang to, no? So here's something that every parent would worry about, no? Sinasabi nila, my child seems to have tantrums at the smallest thing. So maliit na bagay, parang feel niya, nagwawala na siya. So, kailan siya normal na big feeling? Meron bang ganon? Tapos, kailan yung, sige, baka kailangan ko ng i-refer or sasabihin ko dito sa doktor ko or kailangan ng tulong ng guidance. Like, meron ba yung line kung saan, okay, kailangan ng i-refer sa guidance natin or sa mga dev peds, ganyan?
And to add that, Doc, kasi di ba, minsan iniisip natin parang 10 minutes lang, pero isang oras na nagtatantrum, normal pa ba yun, di ba? And like, I've seen that, no? Well, maybe not with my child, but in the mall, parang nakikita ko, ang haba-haba na. So even I would wonder, like, is that typical? So, Doc Angel.
Yeah, good question. It's a very good question. You're putting me in a difficult spot because I don't want to mislabel our children. Pero general rule siguro is your point, right? Masyadong mahaba na. Pati ikaw, kinakabahan ka na sa haba ng tantrum na experience. Sometimes we put a general rule that tantrums usually lasts about 10 to 20 minutes. No? And then they can eventually calm down. If, let's say, sobra-sobra na, hindi mo na sila makausap, they're so dysregulated already, to the point na, I'm going to transition that term to an actual meltdown. So a meltdown is already a phase where there's no reasoning with the behavior that you're seeing, and they need extra additional support already. Then perhaps, kung madalas siyang meltdown all the time, that's something that I would be concerned about. If it's something that happens multiple times a day. So you can still have a few tantrums a few times a day, might be because it's personality. But if it's happening so often, it's hirap ka na as parent or adult taking care of the child, that might be another reason for getting checked as well. And then the third one I think about is usually if anyone is getting hurt already, whether the child is hurting themselves or hurting others. First off, I'll say that they probably are not hurting others and themselves on purpose per se. Pero minsan, nahihirapan na talaga sila to the point of harm. So these are probably the situations where I would probably seek for professional guidance already.
Maganda yun, Del. Kasi I think a message for our parents is that they don't need to handle it by themselves. And that they can always seek for help. And help will be available. If only they ask for it, right? Yes, Dr. P, you wanted to ask something from Doc Angel.
Parang gusto kong balikan yung sinabi mo kanina, Doc Jello, kasi na-interrupt kita pero yung what if the tantrums happen in a public place? Like, meron ka ba dyang tips na pwedeng ma-share or like, ano pwedeng gawin? Like, we have proactive parents naman, di ba? Ano nga pwede nilang gawin if in public, papanoorin na yung bata na nagwawala, nasa mall or toy store, ganun.
Yeah. First off, you probably want to be proactive and preventive if, let's say, that's something concerning about your child, what you know about the child. So you would probably introduce transitions, di ba? Pag toy store. Bago pa kayo pumasok ng toy store, wala po tayong bibilhin today, titingin lang tayo. I have pamangkins who will say, we can buy something, but it has to only be this much. So setting ground rules, setting expectations before going in. If it's time to come out, you might want to put in transitions and guidance. Oh, we have to leave in 5 minutes. Para hindi siya abrupt changes. To just try to avoid the tantrums from happening. If it's already happening, and I understand, public siya, probably first thing to think about is this child safe? And if it's not safe, you probably want to move away to maybe a quieter place, and giving them that space also to just kind of calm down as well. And it goes back to values din ng families. There are some parents who are all out ready to support their child there, then and there in public. That's wonderful, that's great. But also recognizing there are some families na nakaka-dysregulate sa magulang mismo to be the center of this attention that's happening. So do what's best for you that will help you calm down also. If you need to go to a corridor, if you need to go to a corner, maybe bring your child there and support them in that way.
Ngayon din Doc Angel, no? Kasi naalala ko when, ayan, am I allowed to talk about my son, Mateo? I remember, like when he was in his terrible twos and terrible threes, like what I was doing, I guess like unconsciously, what Dr. Angel said, no? Parang, what I would do is, like, he starts throwing a tantrum. So I would go down to his level. Ako mismo uupo, para eye to eye kami. And then yung sinabi ko ni Doc Angel na, I would say, oh, Matty, I can see that you're upset right now. So, yung naming the emotions, or sometimes I would also clarify, are you upset or are you just hungry? Diba? And then, yung pangatlo, diba, parang I think Dr. P, you also covered it last episode, no? Yung mga breathing exercises. So we would breathe together. So tama naman yung ginawa ko, Doc Angel, or is that
Yes, because I think going down to a child's level is part of that regulation. Can you imagine laki-laki nating tao and you have this little 2-year-old that you're towering over them with your big voice and your scary emotions of panic, nakaka-dysregulate din sa bata. So sometimes finding your own calm is the regulation and relational piece before you can actually speak with them. And I can ask these questions nga, ano, are you just hungry, or are you frustrated, or angry, depending then on the age. And Doc Jello, maybe one thing that I wanted to share with the families is sometimes I have this discomfort when we tell parents that we have terrible twos and terrible threes, only because they're not being terrible on purpose. And I'm hoping if I could just give a takeaway for some people to maybe think about our toddlers slightly differently. Kasi just being more positive in mindset na, they need help. They need my help to regulate first. Might already help them might also help the adult not be so frustrated also versus terrible twos kasi to smash ang bata talaga. That's not the case though.
Yeah, oo. Ako agree, no? Parang reframing din how we view the behaviors, 'di ba? Yun yung sinasabi din ni Doc Inch. Doc Inch, tanungin ko lang. Like, 2 questions to. Ano ba yung usual triggers? Kasi 'di ba gusto natin na maunahan natin bago maging full-blown na tantrum siya, 'di ba? So siguro yung first question is ano yung triggers? And then question din po to galing sa basic ed natin. What are proactive steps that adults, parents, and teachers can take to prevent tantrums even before they start? Like, may nakikita ka ba dyan, namumula na yung bata? Or like, meron bang mga ganong signs na, okay, malapit na siya talaga mag full-blown tantrum? Pwede mo ba kami bigyan ng tips dyan?
Sige, start tayo sa triggers. No, one is to know that these tantrums have triggers. There's an antecedent to the behavior all the time. And they, most often than not, it's transition related. Leaving a playground, turning off a screen suddenly, leaving the toy store. These things are the transition challenges that some children have. Very outright then, hungry and tired. No? So when the body is hungry and tired, the basic needs mo na siya. Therefore, tantrums might happen kasi the control of emotion disappears as well. The third one would probably be frustration when they can't do something yet. No, so they feel like they can because that's what toddlers do. They think they can do it all on their own, but then they can't, and they'll have a frustrating time and then have a meltdown also. No, so those are probably the biggest triggers that we can think about. When we think about in terms of being proactive and what we can do about it, I think being able to recognize it is one way. Sabi mo, namumula na sa mukha. So what are the physical features of a dysregulated child? Meron akong mga pictures usually I show parents when we have sessions. Pero the face turns red, the eyes are big. You know that they're fidgety or not quite listening. Their body is not calm enough to listen. These are your signs na triggered na sila. So what can we do as the adults? We want to work on being calm. Being calm, staying consistent, I think, is one of the important things we need to do. Sabi nga natin, co-regulation. So kids are going to borrow the calm from us adults. So if you're steady, and you're consistent, that's how you respond all the time. Hopefully, this is what we support them so they can eventually self-regulate. We mentioned earlier, Dr. Jello mentioned acknowledging the feelings. Can we talk about it? Alam niyo ba kung gusto mo ba maglaro or time to go home na ba yan? Or validate these emotions. No, I think that's one of it. So aside from naming the emotions, you want to validate that the emotion is allowed. Kasi baka naman, nainis ka na, bawal ka mainis. All feelings allowed. All feelings are allowed. It's the behavior that we need to set clearer boundaries on. And then sometimes our children benefit from routines. So if there are clear routines expected for the day, that's why some children do really well in school if we can stick to the regular schedule of the school and they know what to expect. So those are some of the things that we want to think about. And then maybe model the behavior, helping them problem solve also. So, di ba, pag na-regulate natin, nag-relate na tayo, can we problem solve what had happened para mapag-usapan natin and help them recognize that they had a hard time and now we're going to fix it also.
Pero ang ganda ng sinabi and super useful ng sinabi mo, Doc Angel. Na parang yung sa transitions, no? Parang sometimes they're getting into tantrums because suddenly there's a change, di ba? Parang they need to leave the playground. So I guess to your point, di ba? Parang giving them a heads up, di ba? Everyone needs heads ups, even adults, di ba? So or a 5-minute warning, oh, anak, alis na tayo ng playground, okay? Please start packing up your toys. And then yung even engaging our kids, no, with routines and letting them know of the plans, those are very, very useful tips, Doc Angel. Thank you very much. But Doc Angel, we've been talking about the kid. Now naman, let's talk about the parent side of things. I also know a lot of parents who are, I guess, on the fence and confused when it comes to setting boundaries. Some parents feel like, am I starting to become too harsh to my kid? Or yung iba naman, nararamdaman nila, parang, masyado ba akong tolerant? Masyado ba akong mabait? So, paano kaya yun, Doc Angel? Parang how do we help parents set limits, set personal boundaries when it comes to managing kids?
That's such a broken record din ako. I always go back to being able to regulate, being able to relate, and setting your limits early on. So sometimes there are some parents who might not think of it ahead of time, but you may want to discuss with your co-parent or as teachers, what values do we want our children to know? What values do we want them to be following? And what rules are going to be allowed? So for example, screen time is a big issue for tantrums and whatnot. What are our limits for these types of situations so that when the time comes, we can follow through in terms of consistency in what we're going to go through, so that when the situation comes in, di ba, mag-regulate tayo, makikirelate tayo, acknowledge natin yung feelings, that's the first one. But we're going to hold the limit that we've set. No? So if it's dinner time, kailangan na mag-off ng screen, then we have to turn it off, right? And then if let's say nag-tantrum nga sila, we offer the support, we offer the comfort also. And at the same time, depending on the age, you might need to support in other ways. Kailangan ba bigyan ng alternative? Kailangan ba siyang bigyan ng extra time just to calm down also? When you're ready, you come and join. But I think the bottom line with all of that would be, dapat consistent tayo in terms of the approach natin sa kanila.
Yeah, I think tama yung, ang ganda nung sinabi mo, Doc Angel, no? Yung consistency is important. Kasi it's also how they build trust. Diba? Minsan kasi pag meron kang winarning sa kanila na, last 1 minute or last 2 counts, and then, sige, another last 2 counts, then hindi ka na nila tinatrust pagkatapos, parang wala na yung value ng 2 counts mo, diba? And they will begin pushing. And yan yung tanong nga dito rin sa atin, 'di ba? Parang kailangan, saan ba yung line na yon, 'di ba? Like, it's important that we draw the line, pero pag may sinabi ka na ito yung maaaring consequences, then you have to follow through consistently dun sa ano. Kaya ito nga nakakatuwa, 'di ba? Parang kaya sinasabi nila, alam niyo nung bata hindi ako lang pala, hindi na kayo. Nung bata kami, parang sinasabi nila, sige, pag nag-tantrums ka, bibigay kita sa police. Hindi ko alam kung naranasan niyo pa yun pero yun, lagi ko nadidinig yun yung sa nag-aalaga sa amin. Jericho ba, nasabihan ka na rin ba? Bibigyan ka natin sa police.
Parang, papakuha kita sa mangkukulam or sa mana ng... Diba? Oo.
Diba merong ganon? So parang, when you think of it, hindi mo naman talaga ibibigay sa mangkukulam or sa manananggal yung anak mo pag nag-misbehave sila, di ba? So hindi yon yung ibibigay mo na consequence ng behavior, di ba? Kasi parang hindi ko naman siya pamimigay sa police. So, yun lang, di ba? O sige, ngayon meron tayong isa pang question. Alam mo, Doc Angel, alam ko meron kang mga studies na ginawa tungkol dito, di ba? Ito kasi parang sobrang common ngayon because of gadget use. maraming mga magulang, sinasabi nila na parang nag-iibang creature yung anak ko kapag binabad ko siya sa cellphone or sa tablet. And a lot of times, parang they get so upset pag time to take out the tablet kasi meron namang limits na sinet, 'di ba? Or meron ngang AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, na recommendation, sabi nila kung ilang hours lang in a day, 'di ba? So nagiging problema yun. Meron ka bang tips or ano ba yung mga findings na nakita mo sa research mo din tungkol dito sa screen time and its relation sa mga tantrums natin?
Okay. Napaisip tuloy ako sa sabi mo research. I'm like, I wonder which research ang tatanungin. Yun pala yun.
Madami.
Thank you for the question. I think one of the things we need to understand is ano muna yung effect ng screen sa atin. And I will always go back to try to feel it for yourself first. Pag nanonood tayo ng mahabang shows, how do you feel when nagbe-binge mga K-pop dyan, mahilig manood ng K-drama and things like that, and you binge watch? For those who do that, how does it feel after you shut down the TV? After you watch for like 5 straight hours?
Sasagutin ko ba yan?
Hindi, wag niyo lang sagutin because baka malag...
No, booking ako eh. O,
hindi tayo mabubooking.
Pinapanood mo. Oo.
But maybe what you have to think about is that feeling na parang you feel so tired and you feel more short-tempered. And that's because the stimulation of the screen and the fast motion of what you're looking for is increasing what we call your dopamine drives in your brain. Medyo neuroscience tayo ng konti. Because I always relate things back to behavior and neurodevelopment. So if you're giving that stimulation, pinapataas mo yung dopamine ng bata, nagiging addicted sila to that feeling of watching. So by the time na i-shut down mo siya kaagad-agad, tantrum na yan. Kasi dysregulated ang feeling. Kasi nawala na yung katuwaan na nafe-feel niya from watching. And if they're so exposed while their brain is still developing, which is why the AAP guideline sana is no screen time 2 years below, is we're trying to protect the brain in that sense. So I think that's something we need to think about.
Yeah.
When we decide to introduce screens sa mga bata. But if let's say meron, I also don't want to say no screens at all. So after 2 years old, when we're allowing it, diba, we want to be able to think about back to ano yung ground rules natin as a family, anong values natin for screen use. And we have additional guidelines for that. And we won't talk about that here. Pero maybe when it's time to turn it off, maybe it's when it's time to transition, we want to give a warning first, right? We want to offer alternatives. For the very young kids, you want to be able to give them either an activity to do or parang it's part of their given schedule. My mga pamangkin ko, my sister, I don't know how she did it, but they were the ones who, because there are rules set, will go, Mama, can I have my turn now? So papaalam nila.
Ask for some time, ganun
For
ba?
some time. And then once they start, dati may timer pa sila because they were only around 30 minutes. On nila yung timer, pag nag-off ng timer, back to consistency. Pagka-off ng timer, out na siya. So they then have to think about yung next alternative na pwede nilang gawin. Either magbabasa ng libro or things like that. So have an alternative na kasunod siya. So balancing it also from real life and also the time that they're having. Sana mas marami yung real life kasi sa screen time that they're also having. Kasi yun, the study that I had done, it was mostly in toddlers. Pero napansin namin was the more screen time we had over 2 hours, bumababa yung actual language skills ng kids. So they actually had mga 1 to 2 points lower in language scores. So in research-wise, malaking difference yun from the possibility of being more higher language kasi language is part of your intelligence. Diba?
Yeah. Thanks, Doc Angel.
And Doc Angel, I guess siguro a point needs also to be made, not just the amount of time, but also the quality of what is being watched. Kasi like last family reunion, I saw one of my pamangkins na 3 years old, pero nanonood kung ano-ano yung pinapanood sa YouTube. And with YouTube kasi, di ba, parang you click on one video, it leads you to another video, di ba? And sometimes,
Sunod na siya. Oo.
ang dami ngayon eh, di ba? Parang a lot of, ako ang nakikita kong trend ngayon is parang a lot of kids, they watch this mga toy opening, like a lot of consumerism,
Unboxing.
di ba? So I don't know whether that might also influence their behavior, their consumption behavior moving forward. So both quantity and quality. Doc Angel, balikan ko lang yung question natin kanina, no? So, the kid, how about the parent? Kasi I know what it feels like, no? When Matty, when we first took him to an international flight, di ba, parang, tas umiyak siya. It's also overwhelming for the parent, eh, di ba? So, what would your advice be for parents, no? Who are trying their best to keep calm and manage the situation every time that their child is having or manifesting difficult behaviors.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Parang very significant, and also when you say that we have to manage quality of what we're watching also. So thank you for adding that. I think for your case, special situations, the international flight. I think that's one of the things we have to take home from that one is watching is not a bad thing per se. There is a time and place where you may want to use the screens to entertain yourself. It should be entertainment, right? And because you're on a long flight, even I would entertain myself by watching or reading something. Diba? So that's one thing to kind of think about also. But as a parent, maybe I go back to ano yung rules that we've set early on. Because once you've set that particular rule, that means you start to think about ano yung iba pang things that I want my child to be able to learn and do also. Because if you start that off and you're consistent with it, then hopefully the request to have the screen time all the time will also lessen. Which means ayaw natin nagiging babysitter yung screens natin. Madalas, even for myself, paglabas natin, nakikita ko other tables na yung little toddler, sinusubuan ng food, tapos may nakalagay na screens there. Na, I don't want to badmouth anyone, but I'm thinking that an alternative could be, pwede po ba, they learn to eat on their own. Pwede ba as a family when we're eating together, bigyan mo siya ng spoon and fork para yun na lang yung alternative activity na ginagawa niya. So that one, natatarget natin yung milestones. Certain children by at least 1 year old should be able to scoop and eat something already. But if they're watching the gadget, they don't get to practice certain skills, then it makes it harder for them to learn the skills and be independent as they grow older.
Right. Ang ganda nun, Doc Age. Actually, ang dami matatarget nun. Ipa-plug in ko nutrition. Kasi di ba if they're mindless, nasa screen sila, they're not paying attention to their hunger and satiety. So kaya nga ngayon, obesity now becomes a problem. So it's actually all interconnected din, di ba? Sige. Medyo may babalikan lang ako, Doc Angel, no? After that discussion on screens. Kasi gusto ko lang acknowledge si Ma'am Michelle na nag-message sa atin with a question, no? So, meron siya dalawang question. Unahin ko muna yung isa. Kasi ito very, very siguro naranasan ng marami sa atin, no? Na if both my child and I are already dysregulated, alam niyo na parang asar ka na, pagod ka na rin kasi. Tapos, and I try to regulate myself first. Parang, okay lang ba yun? Inuna ko yung sarili ko. And what if nawala yung anak ko? Or what if nasaktan na niya yung sarili ko while I'm trying to regulate myself? Like, how will I do that kung nagsabay kami na dysregulated na?
Very good question. And thank you for sharing that question, Ma'am Michelle. I think one of the things, and hopefully this helps and supports you also, is that when you're dysregulated and you want to regulate yourself, most of the time we do it much faster than the children. And it can be regulated enough to be present. And then if you need more time for yourself, some more a little later. But I think when you say regulating with your child, I'd like you to hopefully be calm enough na hindi galit yung pinanggagalingan when we're talking with the child already. So it can be as simple as taking a deep breath to calm your nerves. Kasi meron tayo, it's a brain connection thing. We have this thing called the vagus nerve. pag pinastretch mo yung diaphragm dahil huminga ka ng malalim, nagpapakalma siya ng katawan natin. And then you may want to address the child's concern. So you're right. Ayaw natin na malose din natin yung bata. Because it's possible na sobrang mag-escalate din the concern that it goes into dangerous turf na tayo dyan. But we probably want to think about calming yourself enough na you talk to your child in a calm way. And then once you've probably filtered and fixed that situation or addressed it, baka nga it's good to give yourself some time also. Reflecting is very helpful. A lot of times, nangyayari sa parent coaching sessions ko with families, ang nangyayari nga, it's more about the parents than the child. We start to talk about parenting the inner child. Kasi baka nga iba yung way of that we were parented as children to the way we want to parent our kids now also.
Yeah, ang ganda niyan, no, Doc Angel. Siguro, bago tayo pumunta sa tips, meron akong gustong ipahabol na question din, kung okay lang din. Si Doc Jello magtatanong nito.
So, Doc Angel, actually, Doc Tippy, now that you mentioned it, parang there were also a lot of topics that came out from our conversation with Doc Angel. No, we talked about nutrition and picky eating, language development. So definitely a lot of conversations that we can have. And sana mag-invite pa natin si Doc Angel ulit for future episodes. But Doc Angel, before we move on to our health tips section, what's one thing you wish every parent knew about difficult behaviors? I guess like a very important key takeaway on this topic on difficult behaviors, Doc Angel.
I think one of the things that I would want parents to know is that behaviors communicate something.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's communicating to us how well developed or not quite developed a child's brain is. Yeah, I always go back to brain development. So I always think of it as they're behaving a certain way because something is difficult for them to do. Something is making the situation vulnerable. Kailangan nila ng tulong natin to co-regulate with them. So if ever that is what I would probably encourage people to think about. Na when we expect quote-unquote good behavior, is it an appropriate expectation for the child in the moment? And if it's not quite yet, tutulungan natin sila mag-co-regulate before we teach them what the better behavior might be.
Ganda niyan. Kailangan nating i-reframe yung kung paano natin tinitignan yung mga bad, in quotation, bad behaviors ng mga anak natin, no? Sige, ngayon, kasi malapit na tayo matapos, Doc Age. Ang bilis ng panahon, no? Pero siguro, magpunta lang tayo siguro sa mga practical tips. Like, pwede ka ba magbigay ng what's your top practical tip for supporting healthy child development? And in this case, probably you can relate it with the tantrums na pinag-usapan natin ngayong gabi. Yun lang yung napag-usapan natin kahit ang dami nating plinano. Sige, paki-relate naman. Top tip, Doc Ange.
So siguro in terms of tips, yun, if we go back to, if we're thinking about the brain's still under construction. Therefore, areas that require self-control, problem-solving, emotion regulation, developing pa siya. So, one, let's shift our perspective. So instead of, bakit hindi siya nagbe-behave? You might want to think about, ano yung hindi pa niya kaya? Hindi pa niya kaya na sasabihin ko lang na gawin na niya. Kailangan pala na I go down to your level. Sabi nga Doc Jello kanina, physically go down to the level and talk about it face to face. How can I support them in the moment of dysregulation? So the approach there would be dapat realistic yung expectation natin and also coming in with a bit of empathy. Not a bit, with a lot of empathy also. Because yun nga, sometimes when our kids start talking, our tendency is to think, kaya mo na magsalita sumasagot ka pa nga sa akin So the tendency is for us to think, the little adults, that we can just reason out everything. But if we think about relating before reasoning, then I think I'm hoping that can help us support our kids to eventually be more regulated.
Thanks, Doc Angel. Ako naman siguro mag-share ngayon, di ba? Parang siguro I'm putting on my developmental pediatrician hat. na it's also important as parents, as caregivers, na malaman din natin yung kailan hindi na to typical behavior. And we need to reach out to professionals, to community, let's say the guidance, that ask the help of the teacher para matulungan natin tong bata. Kasi there are also instances kasi na itong tantrums pala, itong meltdown na nakikita natin can be part of a developmental disability. 'Di ba? And yung halimbawa, kung merong disability na hindi ma-express ng bata yung feelings niya or hindi niya ma-express yung needs niya, then it becomes behavioral. 'Di ba? So, alam din natin sana na okay, baka kailangan ko na rin palang mag-refer. Wala namang kasi mawawala eh. 'Di ba? Like sa mga magulang, pakinggan niyo po yung kutob niyo. Malakas yung gut feel natin, 'di ba? Na parang, mukhang I need to have my child worked out. So, yon, pakinggan po natin yon. At saka, syempre, early intervention. 'Di ba? Huwag tayo mag-antay ng masyadong matagal. So, yun yung siguro idadagdag ko naman dito. Doc Jello, ikaw?
Yes, Dr. P. And since we are celebrating World Environmental Health Day this September, no, ang isa sa i-advise ko and where there's a growing amount of research is on nature and outdoor exposure and children's growth and development. No? In fact, may tinatawag nga sila na 25-3 rule for brain development. So that's 20 minutes in nature, 3 times a week, 5 hours per month in semi-wild spaces. So that's parks, forests, beaches. So that's basically 1 weekend in a month. Take them to a park or maybe take them to a nearby beach. And then 3 days per year in truly wild environments. So pwedeng mag-camping kayo, di ba? Or mag-hiking kayo with your kid. And the science behind it is that nature exposure literally changes, no, the brain structure of the child's growing brain, no. In fact, there are some studies that show that when you put sa MRI, no, yung brain ng kid with more green space exposure, they have a much more well-developed prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation. So, imbes na screen time, di ba, pwedeng nature time naman, di ba? So, and I think that's all of our health tips today, Dr. P.
Ang ganda nung parang gusto ko bigla mag-beach. Kaya lang umuulan eh. Paano ba yan, Doc Jello?
Pwede naman, di ba?
Pwede
Maligo.
naman.
Pero basta safe, di ba?
Oo, basta safe. Kaya lang baka magbasa ka. And then. Sige, so, Doc Angel, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and helping us understand child development and child behavior better. So, bago tayo umalis, any final thoughts?
More thoughts.
More thoughts?
Dami na nating thoughts.
Oh, last na to. Promise, last na talaga.
Well, one, thank you so much for having me. I think final thoughts would be difficult behaviors are not, they're not done on purpose. They're also not failures in terms of parents. They could be really signs that your child is still learning these things. So under construction, si brain to. So I think for us, parents are doing the best they can, and you're the biggest tool that children have in terms of developing the way we want them to develop as well.
That's really very beautifully said, Doc Angel. And I hope to all of our parents who are listening, I hope you are reminded that you are doing better than you think. And, you know, whatever worry you may have, if you feel like you are going overboard or confused or feeling doubtful of yourself, all of these feelings, they're all coming from a place of love. Okay? So pat in the back naman, no? To our parents who are listening.
Ang ganda naman yan, Doc Jello. It comes from a place of love. Ayan, nako. So, sa ating mga tagapakinig, next Monday, medyo mag-iiba po tayo ng ating focus. Siguro temporary muna, pero tawagin nating Nourish to Flourish ang ating episode next week. At ang pag-uusapan po natin ay, obesity. Di ba marami sa atin gusto mag-weight loss at parang ako feel ko rin yan, di ba? So pag-usapan natin ng obesity, mag-invite po tayo ng expert sa clinical nutrition at saka, syempre, ang gusto natin yung holistic way of addressing that. Okay.
Oh, excited na excited ako, Doc Tippy. And shout out din lang sa ating 1,300 viewers and listeners. Thank you very much for joining us. Myself, Doc Tippy, and Doc Angel. And to our listeners next week, please don't forget to keep sending in your questions. You can send them ahead of time. Your concerns help shape our conversations. And also, they help other families and listeners too, right, Doc Tippy?
Yes. So until next week po, trust your parenting instincts and give yourselves credit for caring so much. So this is Dr. Tippy Sumpayco Tanchanco.
And this is Dr. Jello Apostol. Happy World Environmental Health Day. And Cura, keep growing strong, Ateneo.
Magandang gabi po.
Radyo, 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 radyo.
Health isn't just about medicine,
It's about care
community,
and conversation. That's why Radyo Katipunan brings you Cura, your campus medical show.
From everyday wellness tips to expert advice on the health issues that matter most to you.
Cura is here to listen, guide, and care
The Ateneo way.
Join us as we talk about healing
Hope and health right here on
Radyo
Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Cura, your